And then when you think about George Floyd's murder, I wonder if you can say which one of those felt like the biggest of the tipping points, and part two, and how are your communities overall responding to this trifecta, these three pandemics, as David said. Christy, let's start with you.
All right. By the way, thanks for having us. Thanks everyone for joining us. I didn't say that. Went straight into comments before, but it's amazing to see y'all here. Love the comments in the chats too, in the chat. Gosh, and I hate to almost use this word, as we're in hurricane season with such bad devastation, but I almost feel like it's been 2, if not 3 tidal waves, right, coming at us. It's like you get the wave, it starts to level off, and then the second wave of racial inequity discussions. So COVID to me was a significant wave, but at the same time, it's been wild how, again, we remember how we persevere and how resilient we are, right, as a country and as individual communities. When I think about just even within our team, we pivoted within a weekend. We were on tech, fully operational, 40 people, and still are today. And so you think about that, and then when you reach out to your businesses and hear how they're doing, much of the same story, again, depending on the sector and what they're facing. So to me, definitely COVID, but I think there was this resilience, we're all in it together, not this, political division. With a racial equity tidal wave, it's so vastly different, right? Because there are very deep ingrained feelings all over the place. And I wouldn't just say two sides, right? It's multifaceted, although there are political components with COVID and wearing masks, right? But very different. And so for us, I think navigating all of that has been really interesting. At the same time, though, Rebecca, I've reflected a bit, what would it have been like had they been farther apart, right? Had we had 2 years since COVID hit. So it's kind of fascinating in this tech Zoom world we're all in right now, that to some degree, perhaps there is more of an opportunity to reach across the lines and work together, though difficult, because if you didn't have relationships going in, it's harder to build them with technology as a platform. But I think that because of COVID, there's some grace that people are giving one another. So to me, I would characterize it as 2 tidal waves with their own unique challenges. But that's what I love about individual communities and our ability, all of our ability on this call to really manage and wade through it versus, what we're hearing at the national level. There's so much we can do to influence our communities in this space. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. David, before I come to you, I just wanted to note about Christy. It just occurred to me as she was talking about if you didn't have the relationship going in, the tech, this environment might make it a little harder. And so Christy, I think about how relatively new you are to Chattanooga, right? Still sort of in your freshman, sophomore years, right? You've taken some big swings in the time that you've been there. But yeah, you haven't been, like David's been in his community for much longer, and Kit's kind of in the middle between the two of you. And yet, here we are in the midst of it. So that is also something very interesting to think about, is tenure of relationships, how you might have to maybe rely on, your board members and your super trusted partners who have deeper roots into the community. David, let's come to you. COVID, economic recession, George Floyd's murder, and the racial reckoning afterwards. Which one do you think has kind of put Omaha back on its heel the most, and how is your community doing overall?
As always, Rebecca, dynamic question. I think I could talk for an hour on this, but I will spare you all that, because I think you've all been going through the same thing that we have. I would tell you that I think from a pure shock value, the civil unrest, I think, unsettled us more than anything else. And I say that because you've all, maybe you haven't heard, but the slogan that the state likes to use is Nebraska nice. And I hate it. I think it's terrible. It doesn't say, not that we're not nice, but it's like everybody's nice everywhere you go, right? So, But the fact is that we kind of tout the fact that we all like people, we're all friendly to people. And I think that meant that we all assumed that while there might be some issues that we need to deal with, that we could deal with it over time and engage. And we've all been working on it for years, that diversity, equity, and inclusion is something that needs to be something that we spend time on. So the fact that it blew up in our face and all of a sudden we were being accused of, the community was accusing each other of not being nice, not respecting people, not utilizing all of our people to their highest potential, I think put us all back on our heels. And the fact that it was happening during COVID also meant that we could not engage the way all of us always engage, and that is sit down in a room and get face to face and talk through the issues and try and solve it. Instead, we're sitting here with flat screens in front of us, trying to evolve, to have this conversation evolve from one that was in crisis to one where we can be understanding each other and dealing with each other. So COVID took away our greatest tool, and that was the ability to get face to face with people that you want to work with and solve problems. And I think maybe that was then reflected in the way the economic recession has been responded to. You know, unfortunately in my career, I've lived through too many of these recessions. And in every one of, in fact, in none of them was the business community given any kind of compassion whatsoever. It was our fault that this happened. We had done something wrong with labor management relations. We had done something wrong with our finance mechanisms. We'd done something, and the recession was because the business community caused something to happen. Shame on us. Now, all of a sudden, there's this compassion for businesses who were put out of business for no reason whatsoever, except government said, you got to close your doors. And you got to close your doors for 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, or whatever that might be. And so we started seeing all these things coming out of Washington and out of state saying, we need to stimulate the economy. We got to help these poor small businesses. We got to get people back to work. And it's a very unusual circumstance, I think. And we don't expect good things to come to business from Washington. You really don't. I mean, when was the last time anybody said, I can't wait for Washington to come and tell me how to do something? So this has been a really unusual response, I think. So I think on top of the fact that COVID separated us all and didn't let us get together in ways that we normally solve problems, coupled with the fact that the only one to blame was this disease that none of us had any control over, made our response to this pandemic and the economic recession different. And then when the civil rights was thrown on top of it, and again, we didn't have the mechanism to solve it the way we would normally solve it, it put us all back on our heels. And we've had to figure out different ways to have really important conversations without being able to be in a room with somebody how we would normally have those conversations.
David, thank you. Thank you for the candor in your response. And for all of us who live in the upper Midwest, I'll speak for myself. You know, that veneer of nice is often, you know, just that. It's like, this is really proving, this time is really proving whether you've got those relationships or whether you don't, and how you're going to work together or whether you're not. And, you know, I would encourage anybody on the call today, if you haven't looked at what Kit's organization has done with the county with One Buncombe, you know, what David's community has done with the pledge, you know, what Christy's community has been doing with the economy and with bringing people around. Check out, these are best practices. Kit, let's come to you again. The trifecta, which one knocked you guys back on your heels most, and how are you now? How is the community dealing?
Well, it's and number one, it strikes me how very different communities are, and the personalities of those communities. We are super hospitable and welcoming people, but not very nice to business for sure. And I'm not sure that's gotten any better of late. So first, when you think about COVID and the fact that we had to shut down a robust portion of our economy, it's not the largest portion, but it's the one we're best known for, which would be tourism. The hospitality industry was hit immediately and severely, especially, you know, we've built this great reputation for being a foodie community, and some restaurateurs have pivoted very quickly, others not so much. So that's going to have a lasting impact on some businesses. And then, and I mean, that was 38,000 people out of a job like that. And we are the economic center of Western North Carolina. We get 40% of our population that works in Buncombe County every day comes from outside our county. So that has a ripple effect. So, so there's that. But one of the things I had been thinking about doing, that I was going to use all this time I was going to have once we had to go home, I was going to think about, I was working on a video talking more about what drives the economy, to try and communicate how important it is that all those sectors work together, specifically, you know, not defending tourism, but talking about how tourism fits. Well, I've wiped that off my list because we've had an object lesson in how tourism fits with every other aspect of business. And people have literally seen how many people were laid off. So that has been super interesting. And then when you put George Floyd on top of it, frankly, what a horrible situation we have had across this country in terms of the racial inequities that have occurred. But it is allowing us to have a discussion that we really, really, really need to have. And so I actually welcome that discussion. I know it has gotten there are folks, but like Christy, there are deep divisions. This is still the South. And as much as we have this very diverse, open-minded group of people, it very quickly becomes something different when you move outside the radius of the town and into other areas of the state and the South. So that's troubling, but I think it's a really important thing for us to deal with. At the same time, so I was thinking about, David was talking about needing to see each other face to face, and boy, am I missing people for sure. But the level of collaboration during this whole thing has been enhanced for us. Clark Duncan's on this call, my partner in crime. He and I,
Clark.
He and I were on daily calls with city and county representatives as well as strategic partners. I mean, in March, April, May, June, daily meetings where we never communicated that much and across those sectors. That is a silver lining that I really want to see stick. So now, instead of just talking about COVID, we've had some very awkward conversations about when protesters show up at a hotel and want to go in and protest. They're protesting about Black Lives Matter, but they want to enter a hotel because tourism is blamed for everything. I mean, that was a super awkward conversation when I brought it up to say, so what do y'all think we should do about that? But again, important conversations for us to have, and important that we communicate and continue to do that as time goes by. So I can't say that anyone, I mean, I would tell you bars in North Carolina they're dying on the vine because they are still not allowed to reopen, nor are movie theaters. Restaurants are open with 50% capacity. In our neck of the woods, we have done a super good job of managing the virus and keeping our loads low. But that also means and we're seeing people flooding in here on weekends in particular now, because we're nearing the end of the summer season, but then approaching fall, which has traditionally been huge for us. And so there's this mixed emotion. There are people who want people back, and yet they don't want them too close. So but overall, I feel hopeful about the whole situation. And I am by nature an optimist and a cheerleader for our community, but I do feel hopeful because I think we've got such solid basics, a solid foundation upon which to build. And I think people recognize that the strength of the community, because we have been so flexible and speedy in dealing with most of the time. So, I mean, I have to say with the One Buncombe effort, it was to create grants for individuals, for 1,000 individuals who had lost their jobs through no fault of their own, and loans for businesses, specifically small businesses. And I mean, I ended up chairing that initiative, and I was whipping the lash across the people at the city and the county who provided seed funding because it just needed to be done. The idea was to be that gap filler money before state and federal dollars came in. And we learned a whole different speed during that process, as has my staff. So I've been really proud of the way people have responded. Now, then again, we're planning, we've got gorgeous weather here, and we hear there's going to be big protests this weekend on Saturday night, and they want to disrupt tourism because tourism is the evil, according to a certain sector of the community. So it's going to be super interesting.
Whew. Well, good luck. On that, Kit, you pointed sort of a good lead in actually to the next question. And, I asked all three of you to think about what excellence means in this environment. I mean, you've all gone through the gauntlet of winning the Chamber of the Year award, which is a gauntlet. It is no baloney. I mean, I think it's harder to win that award than it is to get into an Ivy League school. It's an amazing gauntlet. Sometimes it takes several times of going through it, but you get to the place where you establish yourself in this rare air, like we are a Chamber of the Year. And that's a prize. I mean, there's a lot of hero points that you get for being Chamber of the Year. But boy, how does a Chamber of the Year, how does the grand champion act like a champion amidst all of this disruption? And, I wanted to leave it at that question. And then I heard somebody say that's a terrible question to ask instead, because they talk about the red folder phenomena. And for what it's worth, when you ask like a straight A student, how do you get straight A's? They actually don't know how they get straight A's. They have a hard time explaining it. So they'll sometimes say, well, I keep my assignments in a red folder. Listen, that has nothing to do with getting straight A's. I've had red folders my whole life, not a straight A student. But what you should do instead is ask people to share a story. So David, sorry to put you on the spot. I'm changing the question ever so slightly, but I wonder if each of you, we'll start with David, Kit, and then Christy, could share a story of what excellence looked like among your staff. And it could have been from March, it could have been from last week. But was there a time when your staff just responded in a way that like just dropped you to your knees, just blew you away? Can you tell us about that? David, let's start with you.
Sure, Rebecca. Thanks for all the warning. Although I think all of us on the call would probably say, our staff blow us away every day. Because if you're in this nonprofit world, you never have enough people, you never have enough budget, but you have remarkable passion and commitment by people who are in their jobs not to be rich, but because they want to make a difference. So I could sit here and tell you, and we actually have over a bourbon or two over the years, sat and told stories about things where our people have done really good things. I will tell you though that this is actually a story that I use when I'm trying to convince folks that there's a good reason to be optimistic. And we've been, I mean, as Christy knows, one of the first questions that we pulled together with 5 or 6 of us that used to meet weekly. Now I guess it's every couple of weeks. We started talking about recovery long before we had any idea about how we were going to beat the disease. And I'll tell you, when we did our work program and planning and budgeting for 2020, this was going to be one of those top 5 years in Omaha. We had, from a tourism perspective, Kit, we had the second round of the NCAA basketball here, and was here for a day, but it was planned to be here. Then we had the Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting, which is 50,000 Berkeys showing up every year and spending a boatload of money. Then the College World Series, which we've had for 75 years. And then the Olympic swim trials, which we've had each of the last 12 years. And then this fall was the Final Four for women's volleyball for NCAA. I mean, it was going to be an expensive year, but it was going to be fun. And our economic development backlog was as strong as it had ever been. We were looking at just all kinds of great things happening in the community. And so 2020 was going to be this great year. And then mid-March, we went home. And within 2 weeks, we realized that we had to reinvent how we did business. We had to reinvent how we communicated with our members. We had to start really pivoting away from the things that we'd always done to doing things differently in response to our members' needs. And I guess the thing that where my members or my staff just killed it, we created a economic recovery plan called We Rise that had two components. One was about where do they find the health information they need? Where do they find the government regulation that they're going to have to meet, and how do they meet them? And what will the government let them do, from governors and mayors, et cetera? And they were all asking us those questions, and nobody had the answers. And so our team put a document together that gave them the answers. It's a document that's a living document. It's on our website. It's called We Rise. And it gives them curated information about each of those big questions. Now, we were blessed that the University of Nebraska Medical Center has a global center for health security that develops, that keeps track of daily tallies of the virus and what's happening in this region. And so we had a place that we could send people. But then we started getting more and more and more robust on that information. And what really reason I say I'm really impressed with this one is that it didn't take us long. 30 days after we said we need to do a recovery document, we had a recovery document. And as soon as we had the recovery document, then our board started saying, okay, now we know how to do this. What's acceleration out of this recovery going to look like? So then we had to create a set of task forces called Thrive 2020 that would look at how do we accelerate into this recovery so that we're sprinting out of this recession rather than trudging out of it. A week later, we had the Thrive 2020 committees and task forces in place, and they're all doing their work. We ended up raising $250,000 to do things just in 2020 that would help us fix things. And so, if I'm going to be impressed by a group of people, I'm going to do it because they not only kept doing what they were doing already, kept figuring out a way to network, kept figuring out a way to keep people together, kept figuring out a way to communicate with our members, kept doing economic development, kept doing talent development, kept doing DEI work, all that stuff kept going on. And oh yeah, by the way, we're going to take on this major initiative and in 45 days have created something that wasn't there before. And that is still today a valuable tool for both us and for the community. So, I think for our team, and I think for most of your teams, the ability for them not only to pivot, but also to have some continuity about things so that your members know there's something there that's familiar. It still looks like this. It's not having a cup of coffee in one hand, a donut in the other, and bumping into people. But it is still some value in getting together like this. We've had now more than 9,000 people participate in webinars from April to today. 9,000. And we had never done a webinar in our career. Never in the history of the Chamber of Commerce in Omaha had we done a webinar. And now since April, we've had 9,000 people attend them. All of our major events are now virtual. I can be virtual on 6 different platforms. I didn't even know what Zoom was in March. I knew what Skype was. All I knew is I didn't know how to use it. I knew what it was, but I didn't know how to use it. And now think about it. We're all operating differently. So, the fact that my staff was able not only to keep doing all this stuff and pivot so that we're still providing services to our members, but then also create this fundamentally important document and process just continues to blow me away every day. And I have more stories, but I would steal Kit's time and Christy's time. So I will sit back and listen with awe the work that they have done. You're muted, Rebecca.
Thanks, David. We were talking about if that was a drinking game. I need some of your bourbon right now. 4 roses down the hatch. It's the things that you're describing about how we do new work in addition to our old work, and then we do all of that in new ways. It is really astonishing what human beings are capable of. And, some of the behind the scenes is that there's been a real grace that I know has come with your leadership, and knowing Kit and Christy as I do has come with theirs as well. Because
one thing, if you don't mind, and that is,
yeah, please.
thing has made us all workaholics. And so for me, I walk 10 steps down the hall to my former guest room, turn on these terrible lights and turn on the computer, and then work until I just can't stand it anymore. And particularly when in the middle of all of this, you're getting up at 3 or 4 in the morning and you're working until 6 or 7 o'clock at night, getting ready for the next day. And as much as I asked them not to, my staff was doing the same thing. And it's just amazing the amount of time and energy that they spent doing this, which meant they're basically putting in 2 days of work every day. And they were getting that much done. They were that productive, no matter, how hard they were working. And we had to shut them down. We finally had to said, no more. I don't want to see anybody. No one talk to anybody for 3 or 4 days. Get away from it, because they were burning themselves out and burning their family out. But we didn't ask them to do any of that. They just did it.
Right.
And we as leaders all probably did it too. But I think that's the other part of it, is that it wasn't like showing up at 8 o'clock in the morning, going home at 5 and knowing you'd be there tomorrow. It started 3 hours earlier than that, then ended 3 hours later than that. And it happened every day for probably 3 or 4 months, just cranking it out to try and meet the needs of the community and our members. So anyway, thanks for the nice message about leadership and all that stuff. But these folks burnt the candle at both ends, and we just did remarkable work.
Well, thank you, David, for sharing your perspective, and thanks to all your team at the Greater Omaha Chamber. I remember seeing your recovery document, and I was so impressed by it. I know a lot of people were very impressed by it, and our colleagues on the call today have had similar, recovery efforts, recovery publications. But Kit, let's come to you and then to Christy. Is there a story about excellence at the Asheville Area Chamber during this time of the triple pandemic?
Well, this is not the story, but David, to build on what you said, the same kind of stuff going on and with our staff. And what really struck me when I was doing reviews this year is how many people told me how fulfilling they found it to be killing themselves like that. We have a communications person who has just been cranking out material, and we've done it not only for the businesses in our community, but we've been sharing everything that we've produced with the chambers in our region, because they are so much smaller than we are. And we just said, take it and use it, because we know you're suffering too. And so she was doing different iterations for other communities in the region, and just really felt like she was doing such important work. So that was super inspirational to me and gratifying, and I was just really proud of the group. But here's the story. So we have this organization called MAHEC, the Mountain Area Health Education Collaborative or something.
Coalition?
Coalition, I think it is. Thank you. And so they essentially act as our medical school. And they're a large organization that say grace over 22 counties. So they were also killing themselves during COVID. And the chair of the chamber happened to be their legal counsel last year. And so she came to me, I want to say 2 weeks before annual meeting. Our annual meeting, our calendar year runs July 1 through June 30th. So we were holding our very first virtual annual meeting with presenting awards and taking boxes of goodies to our VIP folks, along with printed materials. And we are going to the wall. All the staff is delivering everything. And the chair comes to me with this opportunity, and they want to give bonuses to all the employees of MAHEC. But they don't just want to give the bonuses. They want it to benefit local businesses. And more importantly, in the aftermath of the George Floyd incident, they want it to also have a direct impact on businesses owned by people of color. So they want our help to do it. So we have a great VP of member services who shall go unnamed because nobody needs to come and recruit her away. but she ended up, so she is focused on annual meeting, and she's also been trying to resell everybody who has purchased a sponsorship. We finished off our campaign, thank you, Lord, right before COVID hit, and came this close to achieving the goal, which was higher than last year. And she's trying to make sure that all these people who have committed to sponsorships are going to stick with them, even though it's going to be virtual, and is being very successful at that. And she's working on this virtual annual meeting as well. And so I talked with her about it, and she said, yes, we can do this, but so I kept stretching things out with MAHEC, saying, give us a little bit of time. When we finally got together to do this, in the meantime, we were creating a list of businesses owned by people of color. And then because that list was frankly not big enough, we added women-owned businesses to it. And then we were still concerned, did a survey with the MAHEC employees to determine what they wanted most. We added grocery stores to it because they asked for groceries. And we're going out and asking, many of these small businesses have no capacity to even create a gift card. So we're helping them figure out how to create gift cards. And we're in the process then of writing checks to them during periods where some of them were saying, this is going to make the difference between my being able to stay open or not. And it was so great on so many fronts. It was great for us as a chamber to be writing checks to people in the middle of a pandemic and to helping them increase their capacity to sell gift cards in the future, and to help this major employer who then said, yeah, we're going to pay you. We're going to pay you an administrative fee. And then we contact the hometown grocery store chain that's right here. And they said, thank you so much for purchasing $55,000 worth of grocery gift cards. Yes, we'll produce them for you, and we're going to give you a discount. And we get to keep the difference between the discounted price and the regular price. So we ended up generating $10,000 off this event, which for us, we were at 4.2 million last year. We're now at 3.2 million this year. $10,000 is, the equivalent of one of the events we do.
That's right.
And the profit margin that we would make off of it, and the goodwill that was generated. And she had so much fun working on this, and all the staff that worked on it had so much fun, in addition to it being so good for so many people. I just loved it.
Wow. Kit, somebody commented that this story just really gave them chills. And the thing that I pick up from this is we've been talking with local governments, with community leaders and so forth since the beginning of the pandemic, that as we rebuild, we need to look for, we call them co-benefits, right? So things that hit two things at once, and you managed to hit 2, 3, possibly 4 things at once, and you got something out of it. I mean, it's magic math when you think about it, because so often it's just a single transaction. One person's ledger goes down, the other's goes up, and this managed to just radiate. Amazing. Christy G, you lady.
Wow, what a great
story of excellence.
I love listening to our amazing colleagues. So our story, I thought I'd take a different path. So as I said, our team pivoted, over a weekend. We were, amazingly agile. And then what we did is we immediately said, let's call our members. So we have a little over 2,000 members. We divvied it up. I mean, I made calls, everyone made calls. Some of them lasted 10 minutes, some of them were an hour, right? And within several weeks, we had all of our calls finished. And as we would have conversations, then we'd tally, it was all fillable forms, database. We started looking at what are we hearing, trend-wise, what are we hearing from multiple people? And there were a few key areas of focus. One was we need information, right? So much like David talked about, we executed on webinars. I think we had 30 or so, really through kind of the June time period. So webinars immediately, and kind of to his point, we had done podcasts and other things, hadn't really executed a webinar before in that fashion. So team quickly pivoted. They also wanted things like public policy updates. So our VP of public policy started, and to this day is still doing daily public policy updates, although he stopped his Friday updates. And those have been a huge value. Folks said we want exposure, so I would highlight from that our story about Chattanooga to Go. We partnered with our city and really highlighted what are our members doing, because kind of back to Kit's brilliant story, you know, there was so much concern about foot traffic. So we wanted to make sure, hey, here are companies you can interact with safely, and here's how to do it. So we lifted that information on our website. And by the way, we used our website as kind of our platform for everything. And they also said, hey, we want hope. So one of the things we continued to do was stay in contact, put our membership team, checking in on them, giving them hope about what's happening from an economic development standpoint, what's happening in other industry sectors, you know, how might they rethink some of their business model and consider hope there. They also said they wanted access to resources, so partnered with our city on a funding source, gave them a lot of access to our SBDC, started a hotline, you know, those kinds of things to make sure that folks felt like they had access. And then on the networking side, lifted up live events like David talked about as well. So those are just a few highlights, but kind of all interwoven from that story that started off with listening to our members, which we then continued to do. We had about 3 iterations of a survey, and would check in with different members, a certain number, you know, each week, just to make sure, hey, are we still staying current with what their needs are, and making sure that we're addressing those. And by the way, we always tried to stay within the framework of Velocity 2040, which was our brilliant work that we stole from what Dave and the Omaha team had done with Rebecca, and said, Rebecca, we need something like that here, which then drove our 5-year Chattanooga Climb strategy, which, to Kit's point, we had just completed our 5-year economic development, talent development fundraise. Literally, it was our last event before COVID, was celebrating that we had reached our goal, and it was all played off of Velocity 2040. How do we bring that 20-year plan to life over the next 5 years? And we still continue to this day to be laser focused on Velocity 2040 and Chattanooga Climbs, with just a reordering of things based on COVID, economic recovery, as well as George Floyd and what's happening in that space as well.
Congratulations, you know, to all of you. We're coming to audience questions next, and I've been private messaged a couple questions to ask, and Yaz is gonna look at the chat now. This is your opportunity for our audience to chime in with any questions you have. They may be specific to Chambers, they may be broader, to talk about, you know, the business community and how we're thinking about, you know, coming back, you know, after all of this. But the private question that I had, and that was sent to me, was about how your communities are doing school. Like, what has back to school looked like in your communities? And I think from each of your perspectives, as the CEO of CEOs, right, as the business leader of business leaders, from that perspective, what is this like? Is everybody just offering a ton of flexible work arrangements? Are you mobilizing your communities to get some study centers together where kids can work on wireless, which I think we've all recognized that is the next infrastructure that needs to be as available as a light switch in every home? And I won't do this in an order, but Christy, would you like to go first to respond to? Yes, oh, she's rubbing her hands. Ladies and gentlemen, Christy Gillenwater.
I love this one. So a few things. We're very involved in lifting up a community coalition called Chattanooga 2.0, which Molly Blankenship leads. And so that's been a coalition around making sure cradle through career, that whole continuum really is interconnected within the community. So I say that to say, Molly quickly started facilitating a children's cabinet. So thinking about childcare services and how that impacts, you know, the workforce, right? So we lasered in on that space. We formed a CEO roundtable about a year ago, but that has really taken off. Those are our 20 largest employers, interfacing with elected officials, interfacing with our superintendent to say, hey, listen, we can offer a lot of flexibility if you feel like you're going to need it during the school year. And we influence 25,000 employees. And so we started making sure those conversations were happening. But we have a superstar superintendent, everyone stay away, much like Kit said, stay away, who is amazing. So county-wide school system. Our kids have been in school every day for 4 weeks. I was just reading his update. It's amazing, 40,000 students in school every day. Although I will take that, 40% of which, I believe it's 40%, have selected to be virtual. Okay, so the option was for everyone to be there. 40% have chosen, self-selected to be virtual. There are some who chose a homeschool. Our private schools, pretty much everyone's in school as well. We have a mask mandate. We've worked very well. In fact, I'm on our county mayor's mask mandate task force with doctors, with business leaders. It's been amazing. So we've really seen numbers come down since right after 4th of July when it was instituted.
So Christy, is this like little kids too? Like kids are wearing masks to school?
Yeah, my 5-year-old in pre-K is wearing it every day, like every day. Yes. So our school system, we were the first ones in the state to go in person and live, and I think continue to be the one, you know, who is seeing the most progress. So third thing I'd like to lift up is this amazing partnership with EPB, the Electric Power Board, who is really our key broadband supplier. They and several other partners, our school systems and others, targeted those families who are 200% over the poverty level, and they are providing internet service. So we raised the dollars to provide internet service to, I believe it's 27,000 families, students who now have internet service. We and a number of other organizations now, we're using Tennessee CARES Act. Like we just garnered about $750,000 with another partner to then buy Chromebooks for those students. So not only are we making sure they have internet, but now Chrome. And think about it from the family standpoint and the parental standpoint, who might have now job opportunities because of that as well. So it's been amazing, but the goal is that everyone has internet access who wants it and needs it within our county, and we're on a great path. So
I'm glad I started with you, Gillenwater.
Amazing.
Sweet Jesus. Okay, who wants to jump in next? Kit or David? We do have one more audience question, and I have a question, so let's be brief. Go.
Let's just do the next question. I'm not sure we can beat Christy. I mean, we're all doing something with our school districts. A lot of remote. We've got 7 districts. One with 54,000 students is just now going to go back full-time, OPS. They gave everybody computers, and Cox Communication made sure there are hotspots everywhere so that all those kids and families could have service. But we will have everybody back in school in kind of a 3-2 thing across the whole county here in a matter of weeks. So.
Thanks, David. Kit, anything you want to add? Oh, you're on mute, sweets. Drink.
The city is still not open completely, and they're doing everything virtually. But I was in a meeting last night, as a matter of fact, about going back, and it is incredible to me how divided people are here. And there's a reason our virus load has been down. It's because this place is locked down. Teachers don't want to go back. It's a third, a third, and a third. And I found that to be the case in our own employees at the chamber. So we're still struggling. There's an initiative underway to expand broadband, because broadband in the mountains is a different animal, and we're working on it. So yeah. It's still in the making.
Right on. Well, we've got the 3 very different representative sample groups here of how the education thing has worked. So Anne-Marie Sawkins' question is about the place of visual arts in the community. And the question I wanted to end with, and let's just go alphabetical, so we'll go Christy, David, Kit. The question I wanted to ask is, how does a long-range plans, like the ones we've worked with you on, a 2040 plan, what happens now? Because in some ways, this has accelerated so many things that were on the plan. You're like, done, like it just has worked its way out. Then there are other things that you're like, this is kind of completely inappropriate now, or it just doesn't seem as. So what does the reshifting process look like for you? So let's start with you, Christy.
All right, great question. So it's interesting as we look at Velocity 2040, pretty much everything's still relevant. People said 5,000 people. We care about everyone in our community having access to good jobs and good schools, right? And those types of things still resonate. Now, the infrastructure piece is interesting. That's a little less, to David's point earlier, people aren't driving as much. So infrastructure is kind of fallen down, but candidly, everything else is we're still laser focused on the other four. All really embedded with equity and education. And what else is great about it is we were already having those equity and education, equity and work discussions, thanks to our 2040 dialogues, that just made us, I think, positioned for this time.
Excellent. David, coming to you. How does 2040 change, and would you like to respond to anything about the arts in the community?
Yeah, so Omaha 2040 was broken into 3 main categories: people, place, and prosperity. And each of those agendas had very specific objectives that went along with it. And like Christy and Kid, we took that 20-year plan and broke it down into a 5-year strategy, what we're going to do first and then next and then next. The arts was a big part of that, because not only from a facility perspective, but from a quality of life perspective, you want to be able to keep people, you want to be able to attract people. And so I continue to be the chairman of the Opera Omaha board, and have been for, I think this is my 4th year or 5th year as chairman. They just won't let me leave, but that's okay. But I think the arts has become such an important part of our community, and it's been the part that's been hit really hard. Particularly the performing arts has been hit really hard in our community and everywhere, I think. So we're using the ability to get people back into the more static arts, if you will, the museums, the various galleries that are around. Now they have been open for several months. We're seeing pretty robust attendance at those activities. But to answer your question real quickly, we decided to revisit 2040 because we found some fundamental pieces of our assumptions challenged by populations impact, or COVID impact on certain populations, civil rights challenges that we're going to try and deal with sort of on this slow, steady pace. We can't have a slow, steady pace any longer. So we've actually hired Rebecca to come back and lead us in a process with some of her colleagues to take a look at those basic underlying assumptions and make sure that our foundations are where they should be, which will then tell us if we need to repace some things, or we need to prioritize some things differently, pace some things differently. So interestingly though, 2040 comes out of the people's mouths far more frequently now than it even did when things were good, because everyone still wants to use it as the foundation. We like where we want to be by 2040. We just want to make sure that we're focusing on the right things now. And so we're going to be pivoting a little bit, but the big, what we want Omaha to be by 2040 really hasn't changed.
Yeah. Okay, Kit, we're going to bring it to you. And the thing that feels like a force multiplier for you guys in the Asheville area is growth. I mean, that was our #1 variable that was driving everything about the 2040 plan, and it hasn't slowed. So how are you thinking about this now?
It hasn't from an economic development perspective either. I mean, we've had some projects that were underway that have stretched a little bit time-wise, but they're still happening. So that's part of what gives me hope too about the future. And frankly, some of the things, this is the AVL Greater document that I keep right here and work with. But I mean, our sectors were similar to David's, but not the same. A place for all people is resonating in such a huge way now. Economic mobility and shared prosperity, could we be any more on target? Thank you very much, Rebecca. Leadership, and I was meeting yesterday with regional leaders, and we were talking about the need to get together around community building initiatives throughout the region, not just infrastructure, which that was from Hendersonville, which kind of I thought that was big. And our other areas growing up, and that's everything from providing more affordable housing, resources, land use. We're in the midst of our inventory of land. I mean, it's super on point. And what's great about it also is that there is such good, when you look at what the city is focusing on and what the county is focusing on, just oddly enough, it all just kind of fits. Wonderful how that kind of thing works out when you have your futurists in residence working with those entities as well as other organizations in town. So I think it really resonates. It makes sense, and we're gonna continue to forge ahead.
Wow, I didn't know the answers to this last question, but well, I mean, whatever was going to happen was going to happen. I mean, nobody, even a futurist, didn't predict a pandemic and a recession and a social justice reckoning. But I tell everybody, if we really want places that work better for more people, we couldn't have asked for a greater gift. And I want to just lift you guys up and thank you for giving an hour to us and an hour to these folks on the call today to share the real stuff on the ground, how you've been battered, how you've worked together, what still matters. And I want to thank you for your leadership. So Kit Kramer, Christy Gillenwater, David G. Brown, from Asheville, North Carolina, to Chattanooga, Tennessee, to Omaha, Nebraska. We're so grateful for you. Thank you for spending time with us and for your inspiration today. Thank you so much. Good work, everybody. All right, with that, we'll see you next Friday, next Futures Friday. Take care, everybody. Safe weekend. Be safe. Stay well.